Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. My name is Bailey, and for those of you who don't know, I am the host of the Ask a Muso podcast. I decided that after getting a lot of feedback after the most recent season came to an end, people wanted to know a little bit more about the actual podcasting themselves. Even the guests I was talking to wanted to know a little bit more about the podcasting world, how to get into it, and essentially I'm going to run through some top tips that I've got since starting my own podcast. Number one is quality. Quality is absolutely key because with the mass of podcasts going out right now, it's really hard to stand out, especially if your quality's not there. Doesn't matter how good your guests are, doesn't matter how good your background is, all the stuff. Everyone has a certain level of expectation. Like when radio really was at its peak, everyone has an expectation of how it should sound. So quality in the sound and the video, which we'll get to later, but quality in the sound is key. Like you don't necessarily have to have the most expensive mic, but you need to have good quality mic. It needs to be going through something that makes sense, that sounds good when you look back at it. It needs to be sharp and crisp at a good level, because there's nothing worse than when you're in the car and you listen to a podcast and it's like, yeah, and that's what I said to him, and I was just like, crazy, and you've almost drive the car off a bridge. Think of all the best ones. Think of Joe Rogan. Think of all the best podcasts you've listened to, and go, okay, I want to get my audio to be at that level, just so that it improves the listener's experience. The second one I have to say would be the more you can control, the better. And that sounds like such a control freak thing to say, but whether it be like lights or how many cameras you've got going, batteries, recording working, the more you can control without having to be like essentially getting out of the conversation and going, okay, is that camera working? Is that camera working? Is that light on? Is that recording still working? Tap. By being able to get rid of all of those things, and by being able to set yourself up in even if it's small at the beginning, set yourself in a setup that you can rely upon, that is just going to take things to like the next level. Because as a conversationalist, as an interviewer, especially in my show where it's more of an interview sort of conversation, to go out of it because you're worried about that camera and this thing and that light, it takes you out of the moment, which defeats the entire purpose of it being an organic conversation. So the more you can control, the more variables you control, the more things you can be like, okay, well, I know that battery doesn't last very long, so I need to make sure I've always got it plugged in, and that tripod works, and this one won't fall over. And the more you can control, the better. And the less you're going to stress about it, and the more you're going to be able to just be in the conversation. Even if you're just doing the podcast by yourself, it's just going to assist you in being able to just be more in the moment. Back to the quality thing. If you can do high quality video, number 3, if you can do high quality video, do it. As an actual full length medium, if you're going to do the podcast in a video format and be like, okay, we're going to share the whole podcast, if you can do high quality video, do it. Like Spotify likes that now. Spotify, people can do the video. Video is still really important, and if you can do that, not only for the clips and the repurposing, but to actually get some people who really want to just, they want to sit down at the TV, and because they don't feel like watching whatever's on the TV, or they're up to date on their streaming show, they can sit down and watch your podcast, and that's an hour or that's 30 minutes, much like an episode of a program or a movie. So if you can do video, if you can do high quality video, do it. The cost. Now, if you look at the sort of setup I'm doing right now, I only did this occasionally with my international interstate guests where I couldn't get in the room. I was much more of a preference to get in the room. But if you're doing things remotely or you're doing things by yourself, get yourself a setup that makes sense for your budget, for what you want to get out of it. But then when you go, okay, well, I've done all this, I've got my camera and stuff, but then how do I put it online? That's going to cost me an arm and a leg. Actually, hosting doesn't have to be expensive. It doesn't even have to be anything more than free to start with. Now, there's lots of different channels you can utilize and lots of different streaming platforms, much like with music and distributors through that. But just uploading through Spotify, you can upload to every platform. I utilize Spotify to upload to all the streamable platforms, the non-video platforms, and then because I like the dexterity and control of YouTube Studio, I did YouTube just natively. So between the two, you can utilize pretty much every single podcast platform, and you can do it all through Spotify if you want, and that's all 100% free. So you just have a Spotify for Artists account, but for podcasters, and the RSS feed sends it out at no extra cost. So there's still opportunities there. You can monetize. Same with Apple Podcasts. You can do, your Plus or your subscription service and things like that, and you can monetize it as things get bigger and better, but it doesn't have to cost you anything to start with. Clips will be the end of you, but they're a necessity. Now, I mentioned in the earlier bit about the video, and if you can do video, do it. When you want to start out, you got to have some sort of clip, some sort of promotional material so that people know it exists. Now, that's simply because there are so many podcasts out there, and you got to just figure out how you're going to be known. It's just like a social media platform, really. So if you can utilize clips in order to get your name out there, get the podcast out there, that's going to have to be an unfortunate necessity, even for the short term. There are lots of cool AI tools and things where you can essentially get your full podcast and put in some keywords and then say, hey, turn this into clips, and then it will go, oh, I think you talked about this that I liked, and I think you talked about that bit that I liked. That's a good way to start. It'll also do captions for you. They're still quite editable as well, and that can cost you nothing sometimes, depending on the platform and what sort of things you're happy to have as concessions, where it might have a watermark or something like that. Or it can cost you like $10 a month, something like that. Which, for me, if you have the setup and you have the other things, it's sort of like an offset from the fact that you're not spending any money on the hosting, and you're able to get it out for free, but in order to promote it, there's a little bit of something that goes with it. So that's just something to think about. But clips, if you want people to find out your podcast exists, it's really the best way to do it. Now, don't be despondent if growth is slow at first. Now, that's the same with everything. It's the same with every social media thing. Unless you go viral in 3 seconds, and even then, who knows if that's sustainable. There's lots of different things to think about when it comes to how to be successful, but I was recently doing a course, and it was run by Vin Jiang, who, if you don't know him, he's the man when it comes to communication and the mastery of our voice and communication skills and all things in that world. And he said, when he was talking about podcasting, he said, and I'm going to just read this quote to make sure I get it right, essentially only 1% of podcasts make it past 20 episodes. Just over 1% of podcasts actually consistently make it past 20 episodes. And that leads nicely into another thing I want to talk about, which is consistency. Being able to be consistent, posting once a week. If you think once a week is not something you can do because of whatever reason, put it a fortnight. You can actually set these things in the Spotify and Apple podcast platforms where it will have at the bottom, and you'll notice that for all your favorite podcasts, it'll have at the bottom uploads weekly or uploads monthly, or maybe wanting to spread that out more. You can do that too. There's so many different options there, but consistency is key. Once people begin to rely on a podcast coming out and it being consistent, people will then look at it and be like, oh, well, this is obviously a thing. This is obviously happening. And you're going to have, especially if you have guests. Now, I had my experience with this with guests. You're going to have some people that like the show for the show. You're going to have some people that like you for you. You're going to have some people that like the interest or the niche or whatever it's about. They like that for that. There's going to be a bit of cold traffic. And then there's going to be people who just like the guest of the day. Now, I know personally, I've got some people that from time to time I will look up, and an Apple Podcast recommends this to me, I'll look up people that I like that maybe host their own, and I'm like, oh, they just went on someone else's podcast. I have no idea who that is, but I like them, so I'll watch or I'll listen. And that's essentially a really big stream of traffic. So without trying to pigeonhole yourself into trying to find people that are quote-unquote interesting for whatever gets views and things, the more you can spread yourself and be like, okay, well, it ebbs and flows. It's not like a song where everyone goes, well, I love what comes out of Delacoma. No matter what he does, I love all the tracks. This is just another one to add to the list. It's like, well, if every Delacoma song was a featured artist, some people are going to be more likely to find it or listen to it based on the fact that, oh, I like that artist that's on this Delacoma, I don't know who that is, on this song, I might like that. So it's the same with the podcasting. The more you can diversify and try new things, especially in the early stages, as you're building up your repertoire, you don't want to be going, okay, well, I've got all my gold in the first 3 episodes, no one listened, it's a failure. You're going to want to try things and see what works, see what doesn't. Look at doing it yourself, look at doing it with your guests, spread things out, so then as you get more consistent viewership and listenership, then you can really throw out the winners, the Hail Marys, and get some real good traction. So to summarize, when it comes to podcasting, it's fun. Like, it really is the best. I think it's one thing to get used to speaking with other people and that sort of world in an in-person setting, but being able to have a conversation where as I've said on many Ask a Muso episodes, it's like being a fly on the wall where you're in a conversation as the listener, but you're not included. Like, you know everything that's going on, but you're just sort of listening to them. I put it down to you being in the kitchen whilst two people are having a conversation on the couch. You're just cooking dinner. You're in earshot, but they're clearly talking about something that you're not involved in, and you just get to be a part of it. And it's what radio is/was, but it's so much more accessible now. And if you're interested in getting involved and you're still not entirely sure where to start, hit me up. I'd love to talk about podcasting. I'd love to chat to you about it. I'd love to reach out, collaborate, anything like that when it comes to podcasting, because it's something that is not new, but it's really at the point where it's at its peak and it's really moving. So it's a great time to get involved. And yeah, as I said, there's so many ways that you can stand out, and there's so many things that, you know, are opportunities for you. So if you're interested in that, check out the Ask a Muso podcast. If you're a Muso, or you like Musos, or you see any of the people in my episodes that you'd like to know more about. And as always, guys, until next time, I'll see you later.